I could be reading Iron Man by Kurt Busiek. I could be playing Uncharted 4. Instead, I have to sit here and talk about the meaningless death of CW underwear model number 47 in another very, very confusing and altogether pointless episode of Arrow. Hello everybody, welcome back to Arrow Discussions. We are talking about Season 4, Episode 21. This one's called Monument Point. The location of Monument Point plays into the finale of the episode, and therefore it is in the title. Classic TV cliches. So essentially the idea here is there's actually 3 or 4 different things going on at this point. I've said before that we're kind of at the string of episodes now where it's all building on the foundations the season has supposedly had set up beforehand, and so it's hard to talk about anything that really goes on here because there's so much happening at once and so much of it is connected to previous episodes, so you kind of want to be careful. Initially, this episode didn't feel that way. Initially, this episode felt like it was supposed to be more standalone, more about a particular element of what's to come. Now, you can divide up pretty much all CW shows, including old ones like Smallville, or current ones like Flash and Arrow, maybe even Supergirl to an extent. Most television dramas at this point follow this very basic formula, where you get to about episode 18 or 19, and it all becomes about piecing together the connective tissue of the rest of the season that happened beforehand. You get to episodes around this point, like episode 21, both for this and The Flash, and you start laying the groundwork for everything to go insane. And then in episode 22, you make everything go insane. And then in episode 23, which is the season finale of both this and Flash, you make everything that went insane become normal again by the end and leave us with some kind of witty reversal of what we saw before at the beginning of the season, and then you end out and then do this all over again for another season of television. That's kind of where we are now. There's this kind of false beginning that you think is just about the consequences of Laurel's death and some character relationships as things have progressed, and then it very quickly becomes an unnecessary subplot that's wrapped up very early on in an already complicated episode. So let's go ahead and start there. So we have a subplot here between Felicity's mother and Lance, who have been dating since, I want to say earlier this season, if not last season. They started dating at some point, which I don't know why that's a thing, but it is a thing. So they started dating, they have a thing going, they have a subplot. You pick up on the subplot from the end of the previous episode where Thea is basically living in a 21st century Noah's Ark for the human race after Damien Darhk blows everyone to hell. And then you have Damien Darhk attempting to blow everyone to hell. And then you have Felicity and Oliver tracking down Felicity's father, who is the Calculator, in an attempt to stop Damien Darhk from blowing everyone to hell. Now, with this, there's a couple of extra things that get tagged on here. There's a thing with Damien Darhk and his idol and his powers that gets handled both in the Damien Darhk blowing everyone to hell plot and in the flashbacks about a guy, I don't even know what he wants, actually. I was going to say about a guy who attempted to blow the world to hell, but I don't think he did. Actually, I don't even know what his whole goal here is. We've been through 21 episodes of this show, 20 of which at the very least have featured flashbacks to this dude, and I have no idea what he wants. I don't understand what the point of any of that is. He was just kind of here to drag this along, and I think we'll go ahead and get into the main problem right there, which is the flashbacks have been paralleling the main story since the very beginning. And sometimes they can be done well, sometimes it can't, but ultimately you get this sort of contrivance of, isn't it kind of convenient that Oliver's timelines are always matched like this? 5 years ago to this point, you dealt with something very similar to this. 5 years ago to this point, you dealt with something very similar to this. The third year back is the same thing as the third year on the island. The fourth year back is the same thing as the fourth year on the island. And at some point, you just gotta be like, Oliver, just give us a concentrated list of everything you went through on the island, and we will start proactively attacking these threats as they come up, because they will no doubt line up, because that is just the rule of this universe. And so, with that, we have the idol in the past. Now, if I remember correctly, the Vixen episode dealt with the question of, well, why does Damien Dark have these magic powers, being someone who's fought magic before? And she's like, well, typically these types of things have to do with some sort of idol. Yeah. Well, Oliver, according to this episode, you fought a guy that has exactly the same power set and got his powers from an idol 5 years ago. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you, I don't know, do something? I guess because the writers didn't retroactively realize that was going on the island to begin with? I don't understand. I don't understand how Oliver could be like, whoa, Damien Dark's got all this power, and I can't do anything but brood. But I fought a guy just like this. But I don't think that's important right now. I got a son and a not-in relationship to deal with. I'll just suppress that memory for now while I deal with the situation that could very much use the information that I already have. Yeah, that's Oliver, I guess. It's just he's not dealing with this whatsoever. He's not dealing with the connective tissue whatsoever. And apparently the showrunners for this series have realized that the flashbacks don't actually mean anything at this point. And if that's the case, then hopefully Season 5 tones them down. And even if they start to acknowledge it at some point, I'd be happy, because altogether, this whole episode barely has 5 minutes of flashbacks anyway. It's just a bigger story problem. So we have that flashback thing, we have that ending cliffhanger with Damien Dark seeing a lot of power at the end that we'll pick up on later when everything goes to hell in the next episode. And now the main thing here to talk about is, while we're dealing with all that nonsensical plotting, we also have this thing where the Rubicon device that was stolen in the previous episode from Lila does this thing where it activates all the nuclear missiles at once, or it neutralizes them initially, but Damien Dark is using them to activate them all at once, and that's this whole way of blowing the world to hell and kind of having a Noah's Ark kind of thing going. And essentially what we're doing here is that we need to figure out a way to hack it and stop it from working, and so in order to do that, Felicity needs to bring in her father, who is the Calculator. Now, the Calculator began this season with a really good actor and had no character whatsoever, and we were like, you know, I trust it. Maybe we'll get something down the line with him in more episodes. He becomes more of like a recurring guest star. And then he kind of doesn't, and we just deal with everything in one episode, and then he's gone. And now he's back again to talk about things in inappropriate times. Even the show kind of realizes he's back to talk about things at inappropriate times. He has this whole thing about him being a hacker versus being a father and all that stuff. And Felicity just keeps saying, this is not the right time for this conversation. And yeah, when Felicity's right, you know there's going to be a problem here. This relationship between Felicity and her father doesn't ultimately mean anything. It's not founded on much of anything. It's pretty inconsistent with some of the stuff we got with her origin, and that's even more inconsistent with some of the stuff we got in the first couple seasons. So Felicity's just this mess of a character that we're trying to give depth to with a Calculator, and the Calculator is just not a character. He is just some kind of vague personality that we're expected to latch onto because we understand what parental relationships are like, and the show is not going to discuss them in any sort of meaningful way. We're just supposed to imprint ourselves on this absolute blank slate. And so while that's going on, Felicity loses, is it still Cord Industries or Smoke Industries or whatever the business Ray Palmer was running that he stole from Oliver? She gets fired because of reasons and her not working with the board and all of that, and just kind of adding melodrama for the sake of melodrama. While we go through that, she needs to steal something. Conveniently, the moment she needs this thing in her office, she has been fired from it. And so they hatch this elaborate plan to go and steal this device. And I will say, the one positive I will give this episode is that in that heist operation thing, we had this really fun scene of Oliver in just a leather jacket and a baseball cap kicking the crap out of like 3 guards, and that was kind of a fun stairwell fight. I don't know what it is, for some reason everyone's doing stairwell fights these days, but it was a cool stairwell fight. It does have the Iron Man 2 Black Widow problem of, this is a pretty cool action scene, but it's an action scene against people that are just kind of doing their job and have no stake in this fight whatsoever. So I guess it's ultimately kind of meaningless, but we're willing to roll with it for cheap pleasure. And then at the end of this whole plot of trying to get this device to work and stop Damien Dark's nuclear missiles and all of that, we get to this point where out of all of the missiles that have been stopped, there's one more that's still going. And the one that's still going is heading to Monument Point. and Felicity is trying to redirect it, and her kind of clever plan to redirect it is to mess with the GPS satellites and make it seem like its target is still there, when actually just moving the information. And she does it in just in the nick of time, so the missile stops short and hits like just outside of the town, and instead of millions of people dying when it directly hits Monument Point, instead of that only tens of thousands die. Now question one, which is, how would you know the casualties to that specific degree after the missile had only landed for like 2 seconds? I don't know how you could estimate that. Like, you have no idea how the change in trajectory was going to affect the impact, unless your mind is able to run like a super algorithm and figure out how from this angle the explosion would disperse in this way, how many people would be killed. I don't understand how you come up with that number. Or maybe your computer was doing it because it's tracking this thing constantly for whatever reason. I don't know. Nitpick, whatever. But instead of millions dying, tens of thousands die. And this is interesting. This is actually a really good idea. This is the point where these characters that are supposed to be struggling with the ethics of killing versus not killing have inadvertently done their best and still resulted in the deaths of some people. The interesting thing is, you could spin this as the idea is they did the best they could and there were still casualties, and the needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few. But you could also read this as these specific people wouldn't have died if I didn't muck this up. Now, more would have died, but even in the calculation of these more people, there were still specific people that may have not been in the same blast radius as the one that I inadvertently created. And that's really interesting. And if Felicity deals with that going forward, that would be interesting. It would be fun to kind of reconfigure her character, salvage her, by making her be put in a position, same as Oliver, where she has to make a judgment call, and ultimately it doesn't work out in her favor, and because of that, bad things happen, and then she finally gets inside Oliver's head and understands him more, and they get back together. That would be an interesting place to take this. I don't know if they will, but I guess props for that idea at the very least. Now there are the two main things I want to talk about, which are the two biggest problems with this episode. So there's a thing at the beginning of this episode, which is just kind of a random subplot that gets picked up and dropped within like 15 minutes. It's this thing where Lance is suspended and he has to go in front of a hearing, and he basically just had to say that I didn't know my daughter was the Black Canary. And Felicity's mom is like, under no circumstances is lying a good thing. And this is bad, and you shouldn't do this. And I don't care that you're going to lose your job and everything that your daughter would have wanted for you to continue your life. You still shouldn't lie. And in my mind, I'm just thinking, so if there's a murderer at your door asking for where your friend is, and you know, it's wrong to lie and say you don't know? Is that what she's saying now? Is that her code of ethics? Is it the whole completely uncompromising Kantian thing? Because if it is, you are a crazy person. I mean, I suppose the answer to that problem could also be you could just refuse to say, but that's still lying to a degree. It's kind of a dumb argument to have in the first place, especially because we had this episode earlier in the season where Felicity and Felicity's mom have this compromise moment where they're like, well, sometimes lies need to happen because they care too much about each other, and you just kind of have to roll with it and be honest to the spirit of the truth as opposed to the literal truth, depending on what you're talking about, and lying is a complicated issue. They had like a more nuanced argument about lying beforehand in terms of relationships. Her kind of ridiculous need for Lance to not lie is crazy, and then Lance decides to tell the truth, and it doesn't ultimately matter or mean anything. That's the plot's wrapped up in no time whatsoever. And then there's the big thing. The big thing with this episode is Thea being inside of this little bubble place, and one of Damien Dark's old guys, I think that was supposed to be Anarchy, the kid that doesn't actually know what the word anarchy means, shows up and is trying to take revenge on Damien Dark, and he's attacking all these people that have been brainwashed to live here. And Thea, conveniently, is one of the only people that hasn't been brainwashed to live here. And Malcolm Merlyn shows up, and he's like, let me explain Damien Dark's evil plan to you, and why you have no choice but to do this, and why the human race deserves to die, and all that. And that's ultimately more consistent with Season 1 Malcolm Merlyn, when he has that speech to Tommy where he's like, yes, they deserve to die. But it's still dumb because it takes the guy's teeth away now that he's just a lackey to Damien Dark. And so we have some of that there, and in the middle of that, Thea is trying to get her boyfriend Alex to see reason. Now here's the thing with Thea and Alex, because that becomes the crux of this plot. While she's trying to stop anarchy, and while she's trying to figure out how to get Alex off of these drugs that are keeping him compliant. Alex is not a character. Alex is not a human being. Alex is not symbolic of anything. He's just underwear model number 47 that they have cast in a CW production. Now, there have been sporadic moments throughout this season where he's used in Oliver's mayoral campaign to talk about political strategy. And in every one of those instances, this kid was a moron that didn't actually know any sort of political strategy. And then randomly, him and Thea decide to date, and they go on one date where Thea goes insane and beats the crap out of someone. And then they just kind of sporadically talk here and there. Like, if I totaled all the screen time these two characters have together, it probably wouldn't be more than 15 minutes. In 21 episodes, they had maybe 15 minutes together. And then here, because in the last episode, Thea thought she was going on like a weekend trip with him, and instead they're stuck in like this little bubble Noah's Ark kind of thing. And here he dies. And he dies, and Thea's heartbroken, and she's been after him, trying to make sure he's okay with this whole bubble-domed experience. And I don't care, because he's not a character. And her relationship with him doesn't mean anything. It is, once again, another one of those blank slate moments where I'm supposed to just inject what I know into this situation, as opposed to the writing doing any kind of work to make me care whatsoever. So, at the end of the day, this is another really bad episode. And it's not bad independently. Independently, it's just nothing. It's bad when you try and look at this whole season. Again, this is the episode where we're setting up everything going to hell. And I guarantee you next week everything's going to go to hell, and then we're going to get the season finale where everything is going to be tidied up and we're left with some kind of neat reversal. So, the idea that everything's supposed to go to hell here is supposed to come from this thing of Damien Dark having more power, and Thea being stuck in here and kind of going nuts because her boyfriend just died, the character with no character who just died, that's just kind of there to look attractive, ends up dying, and now there are all these cogs in this giant machine, and the only one that's remotely interesting, strangely enough, is the one about Felicity and accidentally killing tens of thousands of people, and I don't know if Arrow's going to pick up on this. I don't know if Arrow's going to pick up on like the moral nuances of what just happened to her. I think it's more concerned with this preposterous action set pieces and ridiculous melodramatic character work. But we'll see. Because this is not a good episode. This is not an entertaining episode. This is an episode that is kind of like a chore to watch at this point. Where if you turn your brain off and just look at it as nothing, you'll be mildly entertained. But if you're actually someone that watches this show with any kind of continuity whatsoever, if you come back to the show week after week, then there's nothing here that actually makes any kind of sense. And it's the exact same thing from last week, where nothing makes any sense and I don't care. Now it's just more of, I don't care and I'm kind of angry about it, and it makes no sense. So, we'll see what happens next week. I kind of hope this season just kind of fizzles out. I don't want it to be one big grandiose thing goes to hell kind of thing that it's been every season, but I know that's what it's going to be. That's totally what it's going to be. So we'll see what happens. We've got 2 episodes left of the season. CW is advertising both this and Flash of 3 episodes left. This was the third, so 2 left. And then we know we're getting a 5th season. If we're getting anything beyond that, I don't know. We know we're toning down the flashbacks because even the producers realize that no one actually cares about them. So going forward, there's lots of things that could make this show better. There are also lots of things that if you just string along a little bit further, you know they're going to be awful. So I don't really know where we're going after this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said, where you think Arrow is headed at this point. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you next time with another video.